Rebellious Studio presents the Mind Body Podcast with your host, Maria Angelova. Hey, Rebels, welcome to the Mind Body Podcast, your rebellious podcast with me, Maria, where it is all about a strong body, calm mind, healing, and fully living. It is my pleasure today to welcome my guest, Krystal Fannin. Hello, Krystal. How are you doing?
I'm doing well on this Tuesday. Hi, Maria. How are you doing?
I am doing great. I am so excited about the conversation we're going to have. We have talked about this for so long, so it's finally here, and let's inform the world about what you do. But before we get there, let me slow my horses. Let's get the world to know who you are. Who is Krystal? Give me 3 words that tell us who you are with a little bit of backstory of each word.
Yeah, so I would say the first word that describes me is nurturing. I feel like people have told me that I have a really calming presence, and it might be one of the reasons why I'm a healer in the healing community, because I really enjoy getting to know people and connect with them and take care of them. I really care about people. So the second word is effervescent. I just have a lot of energy and I always have. So I feel like I have a good duality between being bubbly and calm. But I am a very effervescent personality, super bubbly. I could have energy for days. That's why I used to teach group fitness classes and, shout from the rooftops up from the front. And then the third word is friendly. I feel like I am a really friendly personality. I have never met a stranger. I was the girl who, I have older siblings, but I had siblings that were much older than me. So I was kind of like an only child, but I would go anywhere and make friends at the park, at the swimming pool. And I still do that today. So I'm friendly.
And you know what? I think all of these words go just perfectly with what you do. And we're going to dive right into it because I think it is such a relevant topic I think it's a topic that people don't know much about. And I think it is so important to educate people on what it is that you do. So with that, I'm going to let you dive in and say, why is it so important that you're all of those things with what you do?
Yes. So I am a pelvic health physical therapist. And so in physical therapy, we're trying to help people overcome pain or mechanical restrictions that they have, which means loss of range of motion, or if your joints feel stuck, or people complain of popping and snapping, or they're not able to do the things that they love to do, which might be Pilates, and things like that. So we help people overcome those physical ailments and get them better than how we found them. So with pelvic health, I'm doing everything I do with all of my other orthopedic clients, but now I'm truly considering this part of the body, which is the base of our spine, which controls and supports so many things like our bowel, our bladder, and our sexual function. And those are fundamentals of life. And if those areas, especially as adults, aren't working optimally, we will know it and we don't feel good. And so there's people like me out there to help overcome those things.
And speaking of people not feeling good, let's talk about what are some of the signs if you have pelvic floor problems. What are some of the more frequent complaints that you hear about?
Right. So frequently, I am helping people overcome leaking with exercise. So that's with running, or you could be leaking with coughing, laughing, sneezing, or jumping, or some type of unexpected high pressure situation. So sometimes that's just a pressure management issue in the whole torso and the core. So that's one thing. Another is pain. So that could be pain anywhere inside of the pelvis or outside of the pelvis, like the SI joint, the low back, groin pains, and things like that. So if there is pain anywhere in that area, I am one of the experts at how to overcome those musculoskeletal things. And then sexual intimacy, if we have pain with penetrative sex, or if we are having difficulty reaching orgasm, that is actually indicating pelvic floor dysfunction that we can actually physically work on.
Okay. And I know when I encounter clients, well, let's talk about this. Can this be only men or can it be men and women? I think that's important to mention.
Yes, it can be men and women and all genders. Pelvic health is reaching out even into other areas of gender identification and people who are, you know, are changing their genders as well, and sex changes and surgery that's dealing with that. So I don't specialize in that, but I have a lot of colleagues in this area in Atlanta who do. So, but for men, I'm seeing them a lot for hernias, pressure related issues, groin pulls, low back pain, SI joint pain, and incontinence actually. So incontinence is just the medical term for leaking. And you can have urinary incontinence where you leak urine, or you can have fecal incontinence where you leak stool. But I most commonly see the urinary. So I treat everybody.
And one other condition that I personally see a lot of is DA or diastasis recti. That is, I'll let you comment on that.
Yes. So that is very common in pregnant people. And it's to be expected that when we are growing the baby, there can be a separation of the linea alba. So that's the connective tissue from your sternum down to your pubic bone. The connective tissue that holds your abdominals together. So as the baby grows, that actually pushes that tissue apart sometimes. And if we are putting too much pressure on our belly, or we're picking up too heavy weight, or, we just have interesting connective tissue. Some people are a little bit more loosey-goosey than others. That can separate. It also has resolve after you have your baby to come back together as well. And there are exercises that we can do. And if it is not resolved, it can lead to back pain. It can lead to urinary incontinence and other pelvic floor dysfunctions. So it's definitely something to screen and try to get ahead of. Now, it is funny, they're not funny, but some men experience diastasis recti as well. That can happen, but more commonly with pregnant people.
And I do have to say that I have seen it in people who are really athletic, men and women, and not just postpartum.
Yes.
But, yeah. And so let's talk about it. I have complaint, I have leakage, I have painful intercourse, whatever my complaint is. Let's talk about the one that when I tell people you should go see a pelvic floor PT, they go do what now? And the eyes get really wide. So let's make that uncomfortable. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. What is the pelvic floor exam like?
Yes. So I will say when you first go to your appointment, it's going to be a full history, right? Because not only are we addressing like your body from head to toe, and also the complaints you're coming in, but we really need to dive into some personal issues. And that also means I need to establish a connection with you. I love doing that with all of my clients, but we are going to address bladder, bowel, and sexual function or issues that are going on. And typically, depending on how much time we have in our session, every session is 1 hour. But in the evaluation, we're doing a lot of, I need to get to know you, and some patterns that are happening, and what are your most common complaints, and really dig deep to the root of your problem. And I can gather a lot of information from our conversation. So then, depending on how much time we have left in our first session, we either do an external evaluation, which just looks like me looking at your spine and your strength and your range of motion. Or if your pelvic floor is the key source and you and I feel comfortable to do that examination, we'll do that on the first day, but we'll always talk about it. And it's never mandatory, but recommended because for some things, because this is what I treat. So if we're doing an internal pelvic floor examination, the pelvic floor muscles are just that, they are muscles. So I need to determine their ability to contract and relax. So I'm going to go off on a tangent here to explain that. Our pelvic floor muscles, again, can be at rest. So at rest, we shouldn't have barely any tension in them. They should just be hanging out. When we do a kegel or a pelvic floor contraction, I should feel the tissues gather and lift up. Okay. And then go back down to the resting position. Our tissues should also stretch and bear down. So like imagine like you're having a baby, a bowel movement, or you're sitting on the toilet. You should be able to relax those tissues and allow those things to be eliminated. If you have pelvic floor dysfunction, you likely have an issue with one or more of those things. Either the pelvic floor tissue is too contracted or it is not contracted enough. And so I need to determine that. So what I do is I just use my finger. This is not like a gynecological exam. There's no speculum, there's no nothing, but I use my finger, my digit, to help feel how well you can do all of those tasks. So that's typically what I'm going to do. And then if you're someone who's coming in with pain, I want you to imagine, we're talking about female anatomy right now. I want you to imagine the vaginal opening as a circle and a clock. So let's say 12 o'clock is like your pubic bone, and your 6 o'clock is your tailbone, and everything in between is the other parts of the clock. I should be able to palpate around the entire clock, and it shouldn't be too tender or painful. But I do work with people, especially postpartum moms, who have tenderness along different areas. And there are ways that we can manually release it, that I help manually release those muscles. And I teach my clients how to do the same. This is no different than teaching someone how to release their hamstring. If their hamstring is tight and tender, I'm going to tell them to roll on a foam roller or sit on a lacrosse ball. We need to do that for our pelvic floor tissue. So I need to identify which bucket you fall under. Are you overactive pelvic floor muscle or underactive? And then address those needs on which one you are, and then meet it back to function. So for you, Maria, maybe some of your clients are coming to me from Pilates, and we are going to work on breath work. We're going to work on the core exercises with their pelvic floor contraction so that they can do their sport, which might be Pilates or whatever their sport is, even better and stay pain-free and have less dysfunction. That was very long.
You know what? I think that's great because it's very educational. And I think what people don't think about frequently is that the pelvic floor muscles are just like your all other muscles, right? They have to be healthy to function properly. Just like you said, the hamstring, if your hamstring is too tight or too loose or not strong enough, that's not a healthy hamstring. It's the exact same thing for the pelvic floor. So pelvic floor health is exactly that, making sure that your muscles down, and they're very important muscles because we don't really think about them, but they're working all day long because they have to work against gravity to sustain all of our organs, like you mentioned. So I think it's so important what you do. And I don't think, like I said, there is enough light shed on it. And I think it's such a key point is to inform people and to educate people around things maybe they don't know it's an option, an easy option to resolve problems.
Right. And I wanted to mention too, so you mentioned these muscles are working all day against gravity. Part of someone's journey with pelvic health, PT, especially if they're having pelvic floor dysfunctions, or they're not able to, gather the tissue and do a Kegel, or they're not able to relax, we are taking some of these even internal evaluations that we're doing into standing, right? Because we live our life upright. So not everything that we do functionally is just going to be on the table, but it makes sense on how we marry it together with your breath and with exercise. Are you actually able to do what you do on the table when you stand up or when you do the exercise you're doing? Now, we don't do that all the time, but I'm just making a point that we don't keep you on your back. We're trying to move you up and out and towards function so that you can live your life and feel your best.
I think that's very important to mention, that the work that you're doing is so that you can function, so that you can be functioning optimally. And optimal pelvic floor function is key for you functioning well. You mentioned breath a couple of times, and that's something that I'm very keen when I'm teaching, because especially in the beginning, I would say probably in a lot of sports, but in Pilates, people are so focused on what they're doing that you see, right? And that
Yep.
tension, educate people about the tension this creates into the body. Talk a little bit about that and the importance of breath.
Yes. And I enjoyed the class that I took with you, Maria, and you are so talented at cueing. And I was following along and I was like, yes, this is so great. I just loved it. So with our breath, the anatomy of the breath is our diaphragm, which is that muscle that sits underneath our heart and lung cavity in our ribs. When we take an inhale, that muscle contracts and it pushes down. So that might look like somebody's belly pushes up, or we're taking a big breath in. Our pelvic floor muscles actually go down and stretch with our inhale. So when we breathe in, I want you to imagine like your core canister, your trunk, so your abs, your back, your ribs, and your pelvis. You're filling air in all parts, not just the belly, but you're also breathing into your ribs and low back. Okay, so you're filling it with air. As you exhale, the diaphragm is going to go back up into the heart and lung cavity, which means we have a negative pressurized system in our trunk. So our pelvic floor is going to follow it back up. The reason why I'm saying that is if you need help with gathering more tissue or being able to do a Kegel, your exhales are your best friend. And when we're doing core work specifically, and you're not breathing, you are just holding a bunch of pressure in your core, in your trunk. You're going to make the exercise harder, and you're at risk for putting pressure somewhere that is vulnerable. That could be your lower back. That could be your diastasis recti. That could be down towards your pelvic floor. No matter if you're on your back doing core, you're doing standing, you're doing something else. So you may or may not coach this, but when I'm working with people in here, I tell them your breath is your best friend, your best self. And if you are not breathing through an exercise, that's a moment to pause and recalibrate so you can get your breath back and be present. Oftentimes that's just when injuries occur. So the breathing part is really important to me. And in my yoga background, breath is very integrated with every single move we do. So those are some reasons that you just want to stay present with your breath, and why you can use your exhales to help do Kegels and pelvic floor exercises along with your core work.
Very, very much on the same page with you. I frequently see people when they try to push through momentum and to get the exercise done. And I'm like, no, that's not how we're going to do it. We're going to use the breath as our friend, just like you said.
Yeah.
And especially as the Pilates method gets more advanced, I tell people you will not be able to advance unless you learn how to breathe through the exercise, because you cannot get the same depth of work if you're not breathing. There's just no way. So
Yeah.
it is very key to integrate breath into your movement, into your exercise. And you mentioned something else, and I completely blanked on what you said. You mentioned the breath.
I was going to say that that's why I really like Pilates movements in general, and my favorite Pilates instructors to not only refer my clients out to if they haven't had an experience and they want to start and begin that Pilates journey. It marries really well with what I'm doing in pelvic health PT. I just might be starting a few notches before you, like really working on deep core connection and breath. And then when you do something like Pilates in a Pilates class for a prolonged period of time, well, that's actually where the physical therapy and the exercise, the rubber meets the road. So it's very complementary.
Yeah, that's when you can start see the improved functionality. I know what I was going to ask you. So a lot of times people would say, I have pelvic floor issues and I'm doing Kegels. Let's talk about hypertone versus hypotone. What do you see more frequently?
Right now, It's actually a 50-50 mix. Before I was going to say, I see a lot of hypertonicity. So the buckets, again, that I like to describe to patients is overactivity of the tissue or underactivity. So if someone is overactive, right, we need to find ways to lengthen. So this would be someone who isn't a great candidate to do Kegel after Kegel after Kegel, because if they are overactive, that means we're not getting any length in the tissue. And as a visual, for those who are listening, I like to think of the pelvic floor like an A-frame house, like like an A-frame house. It's a triangle. So when we do a Kegel, we are going to lift up into the attic, and all of our tissues and our holes come to a point and it closes. And then when we let go of that contraction, it relaxes back on the first floor. Then when we need to have bowel movements, bear down, lengthen the tissue, or take really big inhales, we need to be able to go down into the basement. And sometimes you can actually, with hypertonicity or overactivity, get leakage. You can still have incontinence issues because now the tissue doesn't know how to relax and give when we have pressure into our system. So it can still squeeze out. And then some folks who are on the underactive side can still leak because they don't have enough, tissue to gather. They don't have that Kegel quite down yet. Yeah. So it's not all about Kegels, but more importantly, I teach everyone how to coordinate their breath at first. Once we figure out how to lengthen the tissue if they're overactive, now we need to coordinate how you can inhale and relax the tissue, and how you can exhale and gather the tissue versus just Kegel, Kegel, Kegel. We need both.
Too funny. I'm practicing as you're talking. I'm really zoned into it. Does this happen all the time as you're talking?
It does.
Let me practice my inhale, exhale.
Well, it does. And kind of like as a yoga teacher too, I'm also like breathing and doing some of these movements at the same time as my classmates or, my students. And then when I teach workshops, I'm also like kind of doing it as I'm talking. And I always point out, no matter where I am, for the entire group, hey, just the bathrooms are located over here. We're going to be talking a lot about peeing and things. And if you feel like you have to go, it's right here. So it's just top of mind.
A very important point that you brought up about the overactivity, because I very frequently hear people saying, I'm doing Kegels and I'm doing Kegels. And it's like Kegels is not always the solution to pelvic floor, again, based on what you said. And on a funny note, I will tell you, sometimes I will tell people, okay, we're going to practice the connection. And I remember in a group class, we started practicing that. And one of the ladies goes, oh my gosh, I can't isolate anything. I don't feel anything. She's like, she felt so overwhelmed. And I think part of that is, that's why it is so important to talk about these topics, because we have to break down the stigma about this being an uncomfortable conversation. We all have pelvic floor. Let's get over that. We all pee and poop and have sex. So It's perfectly fine, right? And it's an essential part of our overall well-being. So I'm so grateful that you're here today to offer this information. Any other thoughts that you can think of? I know we didn't focus on you, Krystal, today. We focused on this topic because, once again, I think it's so significant. Any other thoughts related to the topic that you can think of?
I will just leave you with some of the most common things that I give as advice, right? And it has to deal with potty and bladder habits. Okay. So I want everyone to know that your bladder has a muscle around it, and it's called your detrusor. So that's a fun trivia tip. However, that muscle, I want you to imagine now like a squirt bottle, and like a Gatorade bottle that you like squirt in your mouth after like a soccer game or something. When you sit down, as you all should be sitting down on the toilet, you should relax your entire body and allow for your detrusor muscle to squeeze the urine out of your bladder. What people tend to do is sit down and push out their urine and racehorse it out. And I'm telling you that your body is intelligent And we should use the restroom as like a spa-like time. Like when I go to the bathroom, we do have a squatty potty at work and at my house. So I put my legs up, I put my forearms on my thighs. I'm actually breathing. If I'm going number two, I'm actually taking deep breaths and relaxing my pelvic floor to allow it to slide right out. I don't mind sharing. I struggle with constipation, but as I'm getting my stool consistency better, we shouldn't be pushing our poop out. It should just, I mean, you can push a little bit, but not to the point of straining and pelvic floor issues or hemorrhoids. So yeah, I want you all to wipe down the toilet seat, no matter where you are. If you're in public, you'll get to a shower soon enough. Sit down, relax, take deep breaths, and allow things to be eliminated at your own time. I know if you're a new mom, you feel like you can't sit in the toilet for very long, but try your best. And watch your water intake. Those things keep your bladder really healthy. And that's the most common thing that I'm treating people for, is getting their naughty bladders to be not so naughty anymore.
And this might sound funny, but you know what? So going to the bathroom could be your moment of meditation, of mindfulness, to put that phone away, don't take it with you in there, and just use that as a moment to relax and literally let go, right?
I pray on the toilet. It is a moment of humility. And yep. In the middle of my workday, it's my quiet time.
There we go. Embrace it as your quiet time. Krystal, that is awesome. Tell people if they would like to follow you or have follow-up questions, where can they find you?
Yes, so I am practicing this at Athletes Potential in Decatur. So that's where I'm treating my clients in pelvic health physical therapy. And you can also find me on Instagram at krystalhealing.pt, and that's Krystal with a K. So I just post some tidbits on there. And then you can also follow my practice that I work at, which is also at Athletes Potential on Instagram.
Excellent. Yes. And if you guys need us to, if you're somewhere else in the country or the world, then we need to help you find help for pelvic floor type of issues, let us know. We'll be happy to connect you with somebody local.
Yeah, I can share some search bars. You can Google different pelvic health therapists in the country.
Great, that will be awesome if you can share that and we can include it. All right, Krystal, let's end up on a personal note. Let's first of all, I have to ask you, what's your definition of rebellious?
Ooh, my definition of rebellious is just going against the norm and having the courage to do so, and not caring what other people think.
Love it. So well said. All right, and one word of one quote or anything you want to leave people with as an inspiration?
This is so corny, but if you don't use it, you lose it. So I encourage you all to stay consistent with your goals. And if it's something that you're working towards, just continue to do it. And if you don't use it, you're going to lose it.
There we go. Stay on top of things. Consistency is key. Krystal, thank you so much for being here. I wish you continued success, and I know we'll be in touch. And for anybody listening, make it a rebellious day.
Thank you.
Can't get enough of those rebellious conversations? Do make sure you subscribe, like, and share with your friends.